everyone? It is the Ambassador coming out with a brand new video today, and today is a work video. And I know it has been a while since I've done one of these. I'm still working, but only working one day a week. They're trying to minimize everybody's exposure and everything to everybody else where I'm working, so don't get to do these as much as I wanted to, but had some time today. I got done early. I figured hop on here and do an old favorite and everything, do a favorite format of mine, which is a work video. And today, everything we're going to talk about another 90s icon. This is a little movie that came out in 1994. Is actually a superhero movie, but it's a little bit of an old school superhero movie. And today we're going to be talking about The Shadow, starring Alec Baldwin, John Lone, Jonathan Winters, Penelope Ann Miller, and Sir Ian McKellen. And this was a film that I actually got to see in theaters. It was one that I actually got the opportunity to see with my mother and my grandmother, because this is a relatively old character and everything. It goes all the way back to the old radio drama days of like the 1930s and 40s and so on. And this was actually a character that made Orson Welles, for those of you who may not be familiar with Orson Welles, he was the guy that did the radio drama of the War of the Worlds that was originally written by H.G. Wells. He also directed Citizen Kane and so on. And for those of you who might remember from my era, he did the voice of Unicron for the 1980s Transformers movie. But a little bit of the history on The Shadow. This is a rather intriguing character and everything, truth be told. And we do, within the movie, we do get some of his backstory and his history. The Shadow is actually played by Alec Baldwin in the movie. And I can't recall the character's exact name, but he was a veteran from, I believe it was World War II. And he had remained in China and everything, and he had become a gangster, for lack of a better term. And what was the character's name? I feel like I know it. Dang it! It'll come to me after I'm done. But anyway, and during the character's time, he had come across this. I want to say Tibetan holy man who had essentially learned how to had telepathic abilities and so on, who had learned how to fog people's minds, control them mentally and what have you. And Lamont Cranston, I knew if I thought it long enough, that was the name of The Shadow, Lamont Cranston. And he was a very well-to-do socialite, kind of in the same vein of Bruce Wayne and what have you. But he did have, unlike Batman, he did have a superpower. He was able to use telepathy and what have you, and telekinesis to manipulate people's minds, to fog their vision of how he actually appeared. He could move objects with his mind and so on. And essentially what happens to Lamont Cranston, he comes across this Tibetan holy man who teaches him this power and everything. Essentially how they frame it in the novels and the radio drama is the Shadow can manipulate other people's minds, can have them do what he wants them to do and so on. And he uses this power to become a superhero, to fight crime in, I believe it was New York City. New York City! Sorry, that's a reference some of you may not even get, but that's okay. But my mom and my grandmother had told me about this character, and I actually got to hear some of the old radio dramas. They had him on tape and everything that Orson Welles had done. And I had actually gotten some of the books, some of the novels that were based around this character, and I read them. I was like, this is a really cool character. This is really neat. And this movie came out in 1994. And had the opportunity to go see it in theaters, because we went and saw the trailer. We were like, this looks really cool. This is different. This was almost an early superhero movie. And it was a really fun one. Now, I know some people Unfortunately, it didn't do particularly well at the box office, but as for myself, it's a cult classic. It's one that I absolutely love. It's one that I love to watch. I think I'm going to try and find a copy of it on Blu-ray. I actually found out that it is on Blu-ray. And there is one other actor in this movie and everything I forgot to mention, and that is Mr. Tim Curry. And he plays the assistant to Ian McKellen's character. Oh, for heaven's sake. I'll think of his name too and everything in a few minutes. But basically, Ian McKellen is a nuclear scientist. He's a specialist in nuclear fission and everything. He worked on, he's working on early versions of the atomic bomb, essentially. Farley Claymore. That was, if I'm remembering correctly, that was Tim Curry's character's name in The Shadow. But unfortunately, Tim Curry's character isn't exactly all on the up and up, and he's working with the main villain, who's played by John Lone, and the character's name is Shiwan Khan, and essentially Shiwan Khan is a great grandson or whatever of the Mongolian warlord and emperor Genghis Khan. And I love how they threw a little bit of hypothetical history into this movie and everything. It takes place in like the 1930s or 1940s, somewhere along in there, because the set design and the music and the aesthetic it bleeds 1930s, 1940s United States, everything, particularly in New York. But the things that I love about this film is obviously the cast. The cast is top notch. As I mentioned, Ian McKellen's character, Reinhardt Lane. These are very memorable names. You just have to think of them hard enough. But Ian McKellen plays this nuclear scientist named Reinhardt Lane. And his daughter, played by Penelope Ann Miller, becomes romantically involved with Lamont Cranston, Alec Baldwin's character, The Shadow. And what you have happen throughout the course of this movie is Lamont Cranston and Shiwan Khan, they meet. And their first meeting is actually very amicable. And what ends up happening is they become at odds with one another because Shiwan Khan is of the mind he is going to expand his ancestors' empire, his dominance over the world. And the way he's going to do this, unlike with his ancestor who used the bow and arrow on horseback, he's going to use an atomic bomb. But what you have happen is they don't call this an atomic bomb. They call it an implosive explosive submolecular device. And Lamont Cranston actually coined the term atomic bomb. And there's this other scientist that Cranston's working with. He saves his life and everything at another point during the movie. And he's like, hey, that's catchy. Everything, and that's the other scientist. And eventually, what you have happen, there is a series of events or anything. Shiwan kidnaps Reinhardt Lane and gets him under his control because Shiwan actually went to the same Tibetan monk or holy man and learns how also to control other people's minds with the power of his own mind. Basically, it's telepathy. They just don't ever call it telepathy or telekinesis. Everything, but you have to remember this property existed before the terms telepathy and telekinesis were really common and everything. They basically just called it controlling or manipulating other people's minds. But you have the series of events or anything. You have some really cool fight scenes. You see Lamont and everything transformed at different points and everything throughout the movie into the Shadow. His face does actually change and what have you, and he adopts the big wide-brimmed fedora, the black clothes, the twin, not revolvers, but semi-automatic pistols and everything. And it's a really cool, fun movie. It's, like I said, it's a cult favorite of mine. But the things that I really liked about this film is that it introduced the idea that superhero movies could be done theoretically, because up until this point we had not really gotten any what you would call superhero movies. There was a brief resurgence, I mean very brief resurgence, of old school comic and radio heroes, minor known or lesser known heroes and everything put into movies. Another one that they did, I think it was a few years before or a few years after The Shadow, was The Phantom with Billy Zane. That's one I never got a chance to see, but I may go at some point. I may go see that one. One that we got much later down the road, I think it was in the 2000s, was The Green Hornet with Seth Rogen and what have you. And unfortunately, that one didn't do, I don't know how well it did or didn't do at the theaters or whatever. But what we have and everything with The Shadow is this first attempt at trying to do a superhero movie. I mean, yeah, we had gotten Batman, we had gotten Superman, but this was a first crack at saying, hey, can we take a lesser known property and turn it into something profitable? And unfortunately, it didn't catch fire as much as I think the studio wanted. If I remember correctly, I think it was Universal that released this film. Everything, they had the rights to the property or whatever. But I would be intrigued to see maybe a smaller studio or an independent studio, say like Amazon. Well, maybe not independent, but a non-traditional studio, say like Netflix or Amazon or somebody like that, get their hands on the rights to this property and maybe develop an online series or what have you and everything. Because this is a character that has a lot of history and has a lot of depth to it. And I think it would be a very intriguing character to explore, particularly today, and what have you. And you could either set it in the time period like the 1930s and 40s, or you could maybe set it in the modern era. Either one I think would work. But honestly, guys, if you've never had a chance to see The Shadow, or if it's one that's kind of slipped under your radar, and you're like, Ambassador, this sounds intriguing. I think I'll go check this out. Like I said, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. You may not like it. Just because I do, you may not. But I do recommend it and everything. So, but those are my thoughts on The Shadow. If you have anything further that you want to add, of course, comment down below. A couple of updates on the channel for those of you who may not have heard already. This Wednesday night, I will be resuming my Disney Cult Classics stream and everything, and we'll be covering Remember the Titans and Miracle at 7:30 Central. And then this coming Saturday on the Ambassadorial Wing, we're going to shift gears. We're going to do something a little bit different and everything. We're going to be talking music and the music landscape of the 1980s, and we're going to have a little fun with some karaoke. So make sure you tune in for that and everything at 7:30 Central. So anyway, folks, y'all take it easy. I know some states are going to look at maybe easing restrictions. We might be coming out of this lockdown a little bit at a time, but hang in there, folks. We will get through this. I know it may not seem like we will, but considering everything that this country and this world has gone through in the past, this is just another hurdle. This is another challenge that we will meet, and ultimately we will get through it, and we will get through it together. So y'all take care. I will see you on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, whatever else and everything. And until next time, this is the Ambassador signing off. The Shadow knows.